It started like any other routine flight. Passengers boarding, cabin crew checking seatbelts, and the engines of a Boeing 787 roaring to life under the sweltering Indian sun. But within seconds of takeoff, something went horrifically wrong. A chilling Mayday call crackled through the airwaves, followed by an eerie silence that now haunts the aviation world. The crash of Air India Flight 171 has triggered a tidal wave of speculation, confusion, and grief. But what if everything we've been told isn't the full story? Tonight, a veteran airline captain steps forward, not with theories, but with technical answers, flight experience, and chilling truths that the public was never meant to hear. From strange sounds during ascent to a mysterious RAT deployment, from flaps frozen midair to an unexplained dual-engine failure. What really happened during those final 36 seconds of flight? This isn't just about a crash. It's about what every pilot fears most. And as you're about to discover, the real cause behind Air India 171 may be even worse than anyone imagined. The first piece of this tragic puzzle doesn't come from the cockpit or the black box. It comes from the lone survivor, the only human being who lived to tell what it felt like inside the cabin of Flight 171 as it plunged toward the Earth. His seat location? Right in front of the main wing spar, the densest, strongest part of the aircraft, where the structural integrity is often likened to a shield. That may have saved his life. But his survival tells us more than just a story of luck. It speaks of a crash that, while catastrophic, had a specific trajectory, a descent where one specific section of the aircraft absorbed most of the energy. Why did the aircraft hit that way? Why did everything fail at once? Captain Steve, a commercial airline veteran, points out that the survivor's location hints at a sudden loss of control, but not an explosion, not a stall, something else. The wing spar was intact enough to shield a life, but the rest of the plane disintegrated, indicating a controlled flight into terrain, not an aerodynamic breakup. In those seconds, the aircraft was still structurally sound, but the systems? Entirely compromised. Now to the second anomaly. Numerous eyewitnesses and video footage reveal the landing gear was still visibly down as the aircraft struggled through the air. Why didn't the pilots retract the gear? Was it pilot error or something far more sinister? Here's where things get technical. Captain Steve references a detailed analysis done by another pilot YouTuber, Gary B. The video shows the gear wheels slightly tilted, indicating that the pilots did raise the landing gear lever. But the wheels never locked into the belly of the aircraft. That suggests a partial mechanical or hydraulic failure, possibly due to a lack of electrical power. The gear remained in an awkward, drag-inducing position. In an aircraft that needs every knot of airspeed to climb, this would be like flying with an anchor hanging beneath the wings. But more importantly, it suggests that electrical systems were already failing. Which brings us to the next clue. A small device that almost no one notices unless it's already too late. The ram air turbine, known in the aviation world as the RAT, is an emergency system you never want to see in action. It's the mechanical equivalent of a Mayday call, a small propeller that deploys from the aircraft to generate just enough power to control basic systems when all else has failed. And witnesses saw it. Spinning, deployed, screaming through the air. That means one of three things happened. Either the plane had a complete electrical failure, a full hydraulic failure, or the most feared of all, dual-engine flameout. According to Captain Steve, there's only one explanation that fits the full picture. Both engines failed. The aircraft wasn't gliding, it wasn't maneuvering. It was falling in a slow-motion spiral toward the ground, with pilots trying to keep it airborne using minimal control authority. The RAT deployment adds a new layer of horror. It confirms that whatever happened, it took out not just propulsion, but power itself. And it did it in under 30 seconds. The most chilling moment came not from the wreckage, but from the voice of one of the pilots, just seconds before impact. "We have no thrust." That's all he managed to say before the radio went silent. But those 4 words shattered every standard narrative about what happened on Flight 171. Thrust is the one thing an aircraft cannot do without during takeoff. Losing one engine? The aircraft is designed to handle it. Losing both? That's a death sentence unless you're already at gliding altitude. But this flight had just rotated off the runway. In under 36 seconds, The pilots had to diagnose a problem, attempt to fix it, declare an emergency, and maintain altitude, all while facing a total power loss. Captain Steve's analysis makes it clear. The aircraft didn't stall. It mushed, a term used by aviators when the wings are no longer producing full lift. But the aircraft hasn't entered a spin or nosedive. Instead, it sinks, dragging itself through the air like a bird with clipped wings. The lack of thrust, the rat deployment, the landing gear stuck halfway up. They all paint the same terrifying picture. The aircraft was dead in the sky, and there was nothing the pilots could do to save it. Every commercial jetliner is equipped with a flight data recorder, FDR, often referred to as the black box. It captures everything: thrust levels, fuel pressure, flap angles, vertical acceleration, electrical activity. Yet in the case of Air India 171, something was disturbingly absent. The expected output from the FDR was either corrupted, minimal, or missing. According to preliminary leak summaries, only basic altitude and heading data survived the crash. No engine parameters, no electrical logs, no hydraulic readings, just silence. To Captain Steve, this was one of the most unsettling clues. Not because it suggests incompetence, but because it suggests a cascading systems failure so rapid, so total, that the black box itself never had time to record it. In modern aviation, this is almost unheard of. For both engines to flame out, for hydraulics to collapse, for electrics to vanish, all within seconds, would require a convergence of failures more catastrophic than anything modeled in simulations. Or worse, it suggests something external interfered with the data stream just as the emergency began. Either way, the FDR didn't fail alone. It failed along with everything else, and its silence now speaks louder than any signal. Radar logs from a TC paint a bizarre and inconsistent picture of the aircraft's final moments. For the first few seconds, the aircraft climbs at a shallow but acceptable angle. Then, suddenly, it drops off radar completely, only to reappear seconds later at a slightly higher altitude, but with no change in trajectory. What caused the brief disappearance? A transponder failure? A system reboot? Or something darker? Captain Steve and a group of independent aviation analysts recreated the radar conditions using simulation software. Their conclusion: the transponder didn't just go offline. It flickered, as if the onboard electrical systems were cycling between operational states, struggling to keep power for even a few seconds at a time. This isn't typical for electrical loss. This is symptomatic of a voltage fluctuation, perhaps caused by a sudden interruption in generator output or a short-circuit event triggered by a catastrophic systems overload. Even more strange was the way the aircraft briefly held altitude, almost as if it caught a thermal uplift. But there was no such weather present that morning, which leaves the unsettling question: was the aircraft flying or floating? As the crash was dissected by investigators, aviation sleuths online began to notice something uncanny. This wasn't the first time a wide-body aircraft experienced total thrust loss seconds after takeoff with gear failure and rat deployment. In fact, they uncovered 3 similar cases over the last 15 years, each involving early morning departures, high humidity conditions, and a Boeing electrical architecture. But in every case, the conclusions were vague. One blamed maintenance oversight. Another cited undetermined electrical shorting. The third? Pilot mismanagement. Captain Steve was blunt about it. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern, and we've been trained not to see it. It raises the possibility that this failure sequence, what we now see as rare, may be a known vulnerability, one that's been quietly corrected in newer aircraft, but left unacknowledged in aging fleets. And if that's the case, Air India 171 didn't fall because of bad luck or pilot error. It fell because of a known technical shadow buried deep in the aircraft's bones. A ghost that's been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right combination of variables to re-emerge. No crash investigation is complete without scrutinizing the aircraft's maintenance logs. These records are the heartbeat of any jetliner, documenting every inspection, every fault, every warning light cleared by mechanics. But when Captain Steve gained access to the flight's recent logs through a former engineering contact, he was stunned, not by what was listed, but by what wasn't. In the week prior to the crash, the aircraft had reported occasional generator faults. Issues that, while logged, had been cleared without major action. But nowhere in the logs was there any record of auxiliary power fluctuations, hydraulic pressurization faults, or ram air turbine checks. These are critical systems. If they'd been tested, or worse, if they'd failed and been manually cleared, they'd show up in the record. But they didn't. Captain Steve believes this was either an oversight or intentional omission. In many regions, airlines under financial pressure opt for minimum equipment list operations, where aircraft are flown with known minor faults, legally, but on the edge of safety margins. Did someone make a decision to launch Flight 171 with too many variables untested? And if so, who signed off? These are not just technicalities. They are the final threads in a story that, when woven together, form a timeline of preventable collapse. In aviation, the final word is usually found in the wreckage: twisted metal, melted wires, a black box buried beneath chaos. But the tragedy of Air India Flight 171 doesn't rest in what was destroyed. It lies in what was ignored. A series of small compromises, a handful of checklists that were never fully checked, a flight crew trying to solve the unsolvable in just 36 seconds, a rat that spun not just for emergency power, but as a silent cry to the world. We are flying blind. Captain Steve didn't come forward for fame. He didn't come to point fingers. He came to wake us up. Because what happened that morning over Mumbai wasn't just an isolated failure. It was the natural result of a system that too often prioritizes schedules over safety, reputation over responsibility, cost-cutting over caution. And while investigations will go on, and reports will be filed, and words like unknown cause or pilot error will be etched into documents that no one will ever read. A Boeing 787 fell from the sky, not because of weather, not because of a bomb, but because everything failed at once and the system around it was too blind or too quiet to stop it. Maybe, just maybe, this isn't the story of a crash. Maybe this is the story of a warning. One written in smoke and silence, in flashing cockpit alarms and landing gear that refused to rise. One whispered not just to pilots or engineers, but to every passenger who ever sat in a window seat and assumed everything beneath them was fine. Because sometimes, the biggest failures don't come from what we see. They come from what we refuse to look at.